Qualcomm is paying $10 billion for the company that exists solely to destroy Nvidia. The man who built that company swore he'd do the opposite of everything Nvidia does. So why is he selling to a smartphone chip company? Jim Keller designed AMD's K8 architecture, the chip that saved AMD from bankruptcy in 2003. He co-architected Apple's A4 and A5. He went back to AMD and built Zen, turned AMD from an industry punchline into an Intel rival, then Tesla, then Intel. Then he quit and started TenStorrent. Every company he touches builds something legendary. Then he leaves. That pattern is not speculation, it is the resume. TenStorrent spent 8 years building an AI accelerator architecture that is deliberately, systematically, the opposite of what Nvidia builds. According to the information, confirmed by Reuters, Qualcomm is in advanced talks to acquire TenStorrent at a valuation between $8 and $10 billion. TenStorrent had previously explored funding at $3.2 billion. Qualcomm is paying roughly a 3x premium. That is not a "we found a deal" price. If closed, this would be among Qualcomm's largest acquisitions in history, handing San Diego a RISC-V-based AI accelerator built to outperform Nvidia on inference workloads. Inference workloads, running the models, not training them, are rapidly becoming the dominant cost in AI infrastructure. This is the market Qualcomm wants. So what is Qualcomm actually buying? 3 things. First, the architecture itself. TenStorrent runs on RISC-V, an open instruction set that pays 0 royalties to ARM. That is not a footnote. That is a multi-decade financial advantage. Qualcomm is already in a cold war with ARM over licensing. They won a lawsuit in 2024, but never fully neutralized ARM's leverage over them. Qualcomm's December 2025 acquisition of Ventana, a RISC-V server chip designer, was immediately read as a hedge. A completed TenStorrent deal pushes that hedge considerably further. Qualcomm would own an open ISA AI accelerator outright, no royalty flowing to a competitor. That compounds over decades. Second thing Qualcomm is buying, data center credibility. And right now, they have almost none. CEO Cristiano Amon said Qualcomm was, quote, "excited by our entry into the data center." Excited. That's the word you use when you don't have the product yet, but you desperately want the market. Third, and this is the real thing, the team. Engineers from AMD, Apple, Intel, Tesla. A compiler team built on MLIR and LLVM. The cost to replace that concentration of experience at market rates is vastly higher than $10 billion. Jim Keller is the obvious name, but the team beneath him is what actually ships silicon. Analysts are already saying it plainly. They would not plan on Jim Keller staying long. His typical behavior is to leave public companies behind. If Qualcomm is paying $10 billion to acquire Jim Keller personally, that is a bad bet. If they're paying for the architecture and the team beneath him, that is a different calculation entirely. Whether the $10 billion price answers that question is the uncomfortable part. It doesn't. Here's the contrarian read nobody in the chip press is saying clearly. Qualcomm might be making the right bet, for the wrong reason. The RISC-V angle is genuinely strategic. Owning an open ISA instead of paying ARM forever is a competitive advantage that compounds over decades. That part is real, but the kill Nvidia narrative requires more than good silicon. Nvidia's moat isn't the H100. It's 10 years of CUDA libraries, frameworks, and developer muscle memory baked into every ML team on Earth. TenStorrent looks less like an AI accelerator acquisition and more like a talent and future architecture acquisition. The framing matters enormously. The RISC-V community reaction has been appropriately furious. The entire value proposition of an open architecture ecosystem is that it doesn't get absorbed. When the independence champion gets bought, the independence was never quite as guaranteed as the pitch deck suggested. That is the hard truth. The deal hasn't formally closed, but Qualcomm's investor day is June 24th, likely when the company confirms and outlines its data center roadmap. By the time you're watching this, you may already know the answer. If the deal is confirmed, watch the GitHub for contributor agreement changes. Those are often the first signal that corporate priorities are overriding open source ones. Watch for roadmap freezes. Watch for license changes from MIT to something more restrictive. That is the red flag. That is when the open ecosystem story officially ends. And ask the harder question. Does the RISC-V independent story still hold when the company behind it is owned by an ARM licensee? The architecture stays RISC-V. The corporate overlay changes everything around it. If the deal falls through, Qualcomm walks into Investor Day without the headline it needed. The stock gives back its recent 6% run-up, and TenStorrent starts getting calls from Intel, Nvidia, and everyone who's been watching from the outside. We opened asking why the man who swore to do the opposite of Nvidia is selling to a smartphone company. Here's the honest answer. Building the chip is the easy part. Building the ecosystem is not something a startup can do alone in 2026. Nvidia's moat isn't hardware, it's distribution, and Qualcomm has distribution. Whether Jim Keller stays long enough for it to matter, that's the question the $10 billion price does not answer. Watch the commit history. That is where this story actually unfolds, not in the press release. Drop a comment. Is RISC-V dead as an independent ecosystem, or does it just find a new champion? Because if Qualcomm absorbs the biggest RISC-V AI bet in the industry, the next question is, who builds the alternative and who funds it? If you made it this far, you're already in the top 5% of viewers. The other 5% subscribe. Be the 5%.